The African Union Commission Chairperson Moussa Faki Mahamat has condemned the violence that has erupted in Nigeria during protests against human rights abuses by police in the commercial capital of Lagos. Now, this after what appeared to be Nigerian soldiers firing at crowds of protesters, with reports that at least 12 people had died as a result. However, yesterday, some eyewitnesses said that they counted as many as 20 bodies and at least 50 people wounded. And we are joined now by Sophie Mokoena, who is our editor here at SABC, to bring us a little more perspective on what has been said. But as mentioned earlier, African Union Commission Chairperson Moussa Faki Mahamat has joined the condemnation, Sophie. And we spoke to a journalist in Nigeria earlier this morning, and it still seems as clear as mud what exactly happened and whether anybody has in fact been killed. Sophie?
Yes, indeed, there are conflicting reports. The government is denying the facts that there are many people who have been killed, and you look at independent sources, but also organizations and institutions, they have their own reports, and therefore it's quite difficult for media in particular to really communicate to the African continent or the world at large in terms of numbers of people who were affected and those who died during those attacks there in Lagos. Therefore, it becomes really difficult, and it's no surprise that many people have kind of taken a backseat in terms of issuing statements, because you can't issue a statement unless you have finer details. But it's no surprise. You look at Nigeria, you look at the current head of state in Nigeria. This is the very same man who led a coup in 1983, and then later in 2015 he was elected as the president of Nigeria. I remember very well, we were there in Nigeria, one team in Lagos, one team in Abuja, and I was there. I was sitting in front during the media briefing after it was announced that he has won elections. And my first question was that you are a former general, you led a coup in 1983. You have now a government that's been led by a civilian. You have democracy. Have you changed your spots? And he said, yes, I have learned lessons. But it looks like he didn't, because he did announce that he was deploying soldiers after the governors in different states called for deployment of soldiers. And therefore, once a general, always a general.
And I think many people would be inclined to agree based on what we are told is currently happening at the moment, Sophie. But of course, there is also expectation that there would be wider condemnation by leaders, especially on the African continent. South Africa at the moment chairing the AU, and people are asking for a greater condemnation. What has our president said as a chairperson at this point?
Very mum, but I understand. In terms of my analysis as a foreign editor, as a former political reporter, President Ramaphosa finds himself in a very difficult situation. You know that at some point in time, I think it was last year, President Buhari visited South Africa to try and mend the relations between the two countries. You know, the relations are always frosty. The only time we had very lively relations, very fruitful relations with Nigeria, it was during the tenure of former President Thabo Mbeki and Olusegun Obasanjo. But you'd recall even during Madiba, there were problems. You'd recall that the assassination or the killing of Sarawiwa, Madiba tried to intervene, and therefore relations were frosty. And since President Buhari, it's not clear in terms of where we are on the relations between the two countries. And therefore, Ramaphosa, when he speaks, he has to really take a very measured approach, so that it's not seen as perhaps a way to rebuke or to hit back at Nigeria, because we always find ourselves in a situation where people interpret whatever Nigeria and South Africa is doing as competition, because these are two big economies on the continent, Nigeria being number one, us being number two.
And as you rightly pointed out earlier, Sophie, you know, we await facts at this point, because it's very difficult to actually even report factually on the matter because of the sketchy nature of the information that is coming through. But there's another trending topic on social media, on Twitter specifically, and that was Africa is bleeding. And there's talk about a silent genocide that is taking place in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Can you tell us a little bit more about that situation and what's happening there?
Sakina, Africa currently is facing serious challenges. Unfortunately, COVID-19 has kind of exposed the fault lines in terms of poor and lack of leadership on the continent. Many leaders who would have envied the former dictators are now using COVID-19 to suppress freedom of expression, to suppress human rights, but also to fight for space in terms of continuing with corruption and looting of the wealth of this continent. That would include those who have interest on the continent or in the wealth of the continent. And therefore, many countries right now, there are subtle conflicts. You talk about the DRC, you see in Zimbabwe, even though it's not so huge, but you can see there's disgruntlement by citizens in those countries. Zambia, I mean, we know many countries that are going to elections. You go to Ivory Coast, even though there's no killing of people, but the attentions, there are protests every day. Even South Africa, there's a simmering tension. People are disgruntled. And many countries are using COVID-19 regulations to kind of suppress the will or the views of the people. And unfortunately, the very same COVID-19 has kind of pushed citizens of this continent to the edge. And therefore, I think yesterday I spoke about Africa deserves better. Yes, Africa deserves a better leadership. And I think at this moment we have a big leadership deficit. And unfortunately, I don't know how are we going to deal with this. And the economic challenges that are with us due to COVID-19 have added, you know, the frustration and, you know, not knowing what to do right now. And you can see even the African Union right now, much as they are working very hard to deal with COVID-19 at the assembly level led by President Ramaphosa, the CDC in Ethiopia working very hard. But politically, we are really found wanting. At international stage, we are doing well. Ramaphosa is respected as the AU chair. He's doing well, he's leading, because at the multilateral level, there is a deficit of leadership also. America in a mess.
Well, Sophie, and I think many people will agree with you that Africa indeed deserves better. And you look at what's happening at the moment, and some great analysis there from our foreign news editor, Sophie Mokoena, on what is currently going on in the continent. And then you think back to a news story from a few days ago, Guinea-Conakry, where you have an octogenarian still contesting elections on the youngest continent in the world. How is this supposed to happen? Africa certainly does deserve better. Well, thank you so much to our foreign editor, Sophie Mokoena there.